Okay, well, thank you, Luisa. Good morning, everyone, and huge thanks to IBI and all the organizers that make this gathering possible. So today I'll start by assuming that most of us here already know how to start a biochar project, and I will be just focusing more on the CDR part of the journey. I think that we also know like the most common challenges because some of them we have lived them. Others we've heard from colleagues, and we have been hearing them in yesterday's and this morning's presentations. And surely we'll keep on hearing about them tomorrow because at the end, this is a reality that we live in the biochar world. So what I'll share is from IBI's unique position. As you may be aware, we are not a project developer, we are not a registry, but we sit in the middle of many of the biochar actors, such as laboratories, registries, buyers, producers, researchers, and this with the information that we get as well from our biochar academies, study tours, surveys, and calls with our members, is that we collect this ground truth. But I'll also be speaking from first-hand experience, and as I had the opportunity to work on a biochar project with Luisa from scratch. So it was from designing the project, starting with the operations, and finally getting to the carbon credits issuance. And we learned a lot of things the hard way, and there were some mistakes that we wished someone warned us about. So that's the lens of my talk today. So what I want to do, and my goal is simple, is to help you know the most common mistakes so you can design biochar projects that work in real world and can issue credits on time. Because if you keep on doing these mistakes, you will be losing time, but most importantly, you will be losing money. So from IBI's side, I'm from doing this myself. The projects that actually scale do a few simple things very well. And these things helps them scale, stay viable, and stay on time with all of the stakeholders and requirements. It can be from the registries, the buyers, suppliers, etc. So I just want you to know that I might be simplifying this process. I might be missing some steps, but for me, from my experience, these are the most important takeaways and the most important lessons. So I'll just list them, and then I'll go in a little bit more of detail in the next couple of slides. So the first one is the permits and classification. Second one is SOPs. Then we have the two projects in parallel, registry, DMRV, biochar end use, data room, and finally diversifying funding. So you need to remember that being audit ready is not a last minute folder, so you need to start from day one. So if you take between 6 to 8 weeks upfront to log these pieces, you will save months. So the first one are the permits and the classification. So before you think about credits or even operations, you need to log these two basics. The first one are the permits and why they are important, because they will give you your right to operate. And because also we know that they are layered. It can be at a national level, it can be at a local or state level, etc. And also because they take time and money. And the second thing why they are important is because they don't only apply to you, but they will also apply to some of the stakeholders you will be working with. So it can be the industrial park in which you will be renting a warehouse, it can be the transportation companies, the laboratories and users, etc. And then it is the classification. This drives everything, because if regulators treat your biochar as a waste, then you will fall under waste rules. But if your biochar is considered a fertilizer or an amendment, then you will need to consider a whole new registry and some lab specifications, but then you will be able to sell it. And you need to remember as well that the status fits directly into your end-use proof for CDR. So I know this might sound obvious, but loose ends waste months. And in our case, we were renting this facility or this warehouse in this industrial park. And we were working on so many details, so many loose ends, that we assumed that the industrial park had the permits they claimed. Well, they didn't. And we lose months, first for them to start getting their permits and all their paperwork in order, and then some other months for us to start getting our permits in order to get the audit that we needed. So the advice here is never assume, always verify, because registries and verifiers can pause if you're right to operate or if your product status is not clear. So if you solve this earlier, you can pull issuance forward by months. So once the paperwork is real and you're allowed to operate, the next risk is how you run your every day. So let's look the SOPs, that stands for Standard Operating Procedures. And I know this is a part that might sound boring, but you need to take into consideration that if they're not written, if they're not trained, and if they're not signed, they basically don't exist. So you need to do this from day one. And by doing this, I mean training your team. You need to have all these documents, all these procedures before you start your operations, because I know these are iterative documents, but it will be much more easier and it will take less time if you do these little modifications and edits instead of starting from scratch your document. And remember, without SOPs, every batch is a coin toss because it's traceability, quality, and audits that will suffer. Because what you get with SOPs is the repeatable results, and repeatable results are the ones that become in credits. So here are some examples of the documents that you might need. I might be missing some, but these are just examples. So first of all is the intake at drying. For example, who's receiving the feedstock, who checks the moisture, how we measure it, what do we do if it's too high. Then you have your machinery run settings when you're producing the biochar. So it can be the temperature, the residence time, the feed rate. Then you need to also consider safety and emissions, having your PPE, your incident logs, etc. Then you need to have your lot IDs and labels, because every batch has its own unique number that starts from the feedstock, the biochar, and finally in the end use. The sampling and labs, so how often we sample, how we take with those samples, etc. The chain of custody, the calibration and maintenance of your machinery, etc. And remember, just don't write the SOPs, use them, train your team, because it's consistency what turns batches into credits and save months when the auditor arrives. So we also know that great operations are not enough. So you always need to have in mind, to get into consideration, that you are running two projects in parallel. So you have your line A, that is your biochar production, that it starts with the feedstock, the pretreatment of that feedstock, the stable operations in order for you to produce a biochar that complies with the quality assurance and quality controls. And then you have your line B, that is your certification process. And this one starts with the pre-screening of the registry, selecting the methodology, working on your data model, getting to the MRV documents, verifiers, etc., till you get to the issuance of your credits. And also remember that these two projects have different workflows, they have different owners, and they have different risks. So if they don't start in parallel, issuance slips always. So if you didn't start them together, the thing is to start the certification lane today. So don't wait 6 months of operations to start pulling these data and documents, because by then you will be backfiling. And again, that costs time and money. And remember, production is the one that makes biochar, but it's certification the one that turns into credits. So if certification is its own lane, you need to pick the lane early, and by this I mean picking your registry. So if registering late delays validation and issuance, not by weeks, but by months. So we have seen that the teams that register early, they pull issuance forward by a whole quarter. So what you need to do is, first of all, pre-screen the registry 3-6 months before you start commissioning. Then you need to log the standard, so you can start working on your data model that matches the methodology. Then it sounds obvious, but you need to book the validator. This can take between 6 months up to 1 year, and in the meantime, you will need to continue with your operations, and that will cost money. And finally, it's very important because most of the projects often fail in additionality, in system boundaries, in permanence plans. So you need to ask, do our project meet additionality, the system boundaries, what's in or out of scope, the end use or storage that is allowed in the methodology, verifier availability and timing, also the fees and timelines of the registries. Can we meet traceability? And finally, do we have a permanence plan, and who's going to pay for that? So remember, pick early and design backwards. Because if you register after operations, expect to rework months of data. And in here, what I would like to share is that IBI is releasing the most updated guide from the main registries. So we compare methods, cost, timelines, and key differences to help people choose with clear information. So after you pick your registry using our guide, the next thing you need to do is to start working on your DMRV. So as well, this is something you need to define from very early stages. So it is what you measure, who measures it, where the data lives, how it is verified, and what it costs. So remember, if there's no data, there's no credits, and audits get harder. So for each batch lot, you need to record, for example, the lot ID and timestamps, feedstock type, moisture, origin, the mass in and mass out, the temperature curve, residence time, the lab tests by lot, the end-use proof that it can be the contracts, it can be the photos with GPS. And in here, it is also very important for you to consider all the energy and fuels and transportation that you will be using during your whole project. It's like from the transportation of the feedstock, the movements that you might have in your plant, I don't know, using the forklift, moving the feedstock, and finally until you are delivering your biochar, because these numbers will affect your life cycle assessment or LCA, and this will determine as well the number of carbon credits that you will be issuing. So set a cadence and owners, for example, one MRV lead, one data owner per shift, so they can do these daily checks, these weekly backups, calibration logs, etc. And budget it from the beginning, because you need to take into consideration registry fees, validator and verificator fees, the labs, the sensors, the loggers, the software, the DMRV provider, etc. So design data like you're designing your reactor, because if MRV isn't production grade, revenue isn't either. And as we may know, credits are only issued when the biochar is used in an approved sink. So you need to prove the end use clearly, because most registries only issue the credits when the biochar is used in an approved way, and when you can prove who used it, where, when, how much, and for what. So if you can show this, issuance slows down or even stops. And what proof looks like in real life. So it can be a short agreement with the end user. It might be, for example, a farmer. It can also, it's your log in which you will be detailing each minute of the delivery dates, the delivery notes with the same lot IDs as the bags or the super sacks that you are delivering, a few timestamp photos with GPS. Also, it's very important for you to put in to detail in your log something like 12.4 tons of biochar applied on field 7 on May 31st, 2024, etc. And remember, product must match with the specifications that the sink allows in the methodology. And remember that it's the small misses that cost months. So for example, you can have the most pretty photos or videos, but if you don't have them available, if they're living in someone else's inbox or cell phones, and you are not able to prove it, then it didn't happen. It could also be one generic letter instead of having an agreement trying to cover a lot of tons, or using a sink that the method does not approve. So our rule was, before shipping, line up with the sink. On delivery, get the signature. On site, take GPS photos and record the mass used, and then drop it all into the lot folder. So if you start doing this from the very beginning, audits will be easier, because if not, you will be chasing paperwork instead of issuing credits. And I know that I have been talking a lot about information and different documents, and all of this proof needs to live somewhere in which the auditor and buyer, because we also hear this morning from Microsoft that they also ask this type of information. So you need to have this in this folder, and also your team needs to find it easy, in an easy way. So I know this is another boring part of the projects. No one wants to work on this, but again, this can save quarters. And on this, our team had a very big advantage because we had a couple of people that were really organized, and they set rules, very clear rules from day one. And this meant two things: that it was always easy for us where to store things and how to find them fast. So the real work here is training your team, because as you know, many hands touch the data. It can be from your plant team with all of these forms like the intake and drying, the running settings, the incident log, filling out the DMRV software, etc. Then you go to the commercial team with purchase orders, and use agreements, etc. And finally to your field team. They are the ones that will have the photos, the videos, the mass that was used, etc. So you need to make it normal for files do not exist on people's inboxes or phones, so that they go into the drive the same day, because again, if it's not in the drive, it does not exist. So quickly, the must-haves of this data room is, first of all, one link that is shared with everyone and that everyone has access to it. Then is the version control on every file. You know, like this very long name of the documents, but they will help you identify what the document is about, what the version is, who was the one, the last one that edited, etc. And also having a guide on the logic behind how you are naming these documents. And in here as well, you will have like all these documents from your SOPs, your calibration logs, your batch logs, your lab test, the audit trails, the chain of custody, the end use proof. And remember, it's the small things that turn into months of delay. So in here, it can be an unsigned SOPs, it can be photos without timestamps, weight tickets that don't match lot IDs, mixed units. For example, if you're not in the States, you can be using pounds versus kilograms, or miles versus kilometers, etc. It can be missing contracts, missing certifications, missing permissions. And finally, you need a folder skeleton, because you may have this one data room, but if people just start uploading in there the documents without any order, then it will be very difficult for you to find the document. So a clear logic in the folder skeleton as well. So keep this live from day zero and do a 30-minute monthly mini audit. So have maybe two hours of the information. So if they see that some documents or links are missing, they can fix it in the moment and not waiting until the auditor is there. So when the verifier shows up, you are ready. And finally, diversifying funding. We have been talking a lot about this, and I know credits matter a lot, but they take time and prices move. So we have seen that projects that survive, they tend to pair credits with products and services. So the credits, use them for durable CDR removal, for durable CDR revenue, but you need to treat the offtake as a tool, not as the whole business model, because offtakes gives price and delivery certainty, but also spot can give upside. And many teams, what they do is to do a mix, for example, a base of offtake for stability, a slice on spot for price. And also in here with the offtake agreements, you need to take into consideration before you sign the volume. Will you be able to produce that volume they are asking for? The timing, maybe you're able to produce those tons, but you won't be able to produce them on time. And finally, the penalties of these offtakes. And then you have the product, so build local demand in parallel. I know market for physical biochar is something that we are struggling with, so you need to start it locally. And it can be, for example, on agriculture with farmers. It could be on materials such as concrete, asphalt, or boards where biochar adds performance and locks carbon. And it can be also water or air filtration. And finally, the services. So monetize what you are already doing. So for example, if your feedstock is a waste from a company, you can get some tipping fees. You can also reuse or recover the heat or energy, or even sell it. And also you can work on the land and wildfire where it exists. And here it's very important for you to cash runway till your first issuance, because you won't be receiving the money instantly as you sign the offtake agreement. So you will need to consider all of your payments in the meantime, so you can keep up with your operations. And just an advice, maybe you can use a simple target mix of your revenue. So it can be a 40-60% from carbon credits, another 50-30% from products, and the final 10-20% remaining from insetting or from the services. So yes, credits are important, but markets are essential. So if it's possible, you need to blend them. And remember, if your financial model only works at one credit price, it is a bet, not a model. So credits don't issue by accident. It's a clear permit, the live SOPs, the day zero data, and simple end-use proof that makes stone real. So start certification the day you start your production, because yes, biochar is scaling fast, but it's the boring, disciplined projects that cross the finish line, the finish line. So you need to treat certification as a second project, design your data like you design the reactor, and prove where the biochar ends. And finally, you need to take into consideration to don't bet the business on a single credit price. So pair credits with products and services, and build a business model that survives price swings, because that's how projects ship on time and last, and how we move from pilots to durable impact projects. Thanks so much.